The internet is full of tips and tricks and strategies of how to executive function better on a bad day. Well, what if we actually could increase our baseline executive function so that our starting point each day was higher? Let's find out. Hello and welcome to Through the Noise Coaching. My name is Lee and I'm a leadership coach specialised in growing the careers of mid to senior neurospices. And today's topic actually came from a client question that sent me on a rabbit hole of research. Much of the work I do is in the career and leadership space, so helping people take on their first leadership role or managing the challenges that come along the way and the difficult conversations they have to face. But most of my clients have ADHD or autism, and both of these neurodivergences come with executive function challenges. So I coach the whole person, not just a robot at work, and so this is something that we cover. Now, I will say that I'm not an ADHD coach by the classic definition. So ADHD coaches spend their time helping people with ADHD cope better with life and do things like solving executive function challenges. I'm in the career and leadership space just because I kind of enjoy that side a little bit more, and high-performing neurospices often don't get any support whatsoever. Working with people who have executive function challenges means that some days we need to go there, and so this was a question that one particular client brought up. Except it wasn't the typical way that it usually comes up in my conversations. Usually someone is having an executive function challenge and we work through it and we find tools and strategies to help them executive function on the difficulty that little bit easier. This question was different. He asked me if there was any training that he could do to raise his baseline executive function, to improve it to a higher level so that he didn't struggle so much with executive function in the day-to-day. Now, one of the things I value being a coach is that I am continually learning, so sometimes a question like this comes up and I don't have the answer. But then I go away and I do a ton of research, and well, this video is the result of that. I came across a book called Cognitive and Working Memory Training that came out in 2020, so it's actually pretty cutting edge research. It's an absolutely huge book, so I'm not even going to pretend I've read the whole thing, but there is one chapter in particular that is really interesting, and that's what we're going to look at today. The chapter we're interested in is chapter 8, and it's called Review of the Evidence on and Fundamental Questions About Efforts to Improve Executive Functions, Including Working Memory. And the chapter itself is a whole 250 pages long, not including the references at the end. It's absolutely huge. And I'm not going to pretend that I read every single section in detail, because some of them go deep into the methodology used to analyse particular things, but I read almost the entire thing. Fortunately, the chapter repeats itself a lot, so if you're interested in reading it yourself, don't go and read the whole thing. Read the introduction and read the conclusion and you'll get an understanding of what the chapter is about. Something I kind of wish I'd done, but I wanted to do my due diligence and read as much of it as possible. This chapter goes deep. It looks at 179 studies from all over the world to analyse them critically to see how executive function interventions perform. Before analysing, they laid out 9 fundamental principles that are important to executive function, and so we're going to have a look at those now. The first is that it is impossible to improve executive function across the whole range of the lifespan. You're never too young to start improving it, you're never too old to start improving it. So those of you watching this who are writing off saying, I'm a lost cause, you are not a lost cause. You are not too old to start improving your executive function. There's also no one way to improve your executive function, but of course some methods are better than others. Principle number 2 is that you only improve what you train. So if you spend so much time training your working memory, yeah, your working memory is going to get better, but your other areas of executive function are going to be largely unaffected. And in fact, they found that for ADHD, interventions that focused on just one weren't super helpful. And in order to get benefits for ADHD, then training a variety of executive functions was what was needed. Number 3 was that in order to see some benefits, we needed continual challenge. So it needed to be difficult enough to keep us interested and keep on going, but not so difficult that it was daunting and made people want to give up. Executive function benefits do diminish over time if you stop training them. It's a bit like with exercise. If you're exercising regularly, you're maintaining or even improving your fitness, but if you suddenly stop working out for 2 years, you're probably going to notice a decline in your overall fitness. Executive function works the same. Principle 5 is really important. It's that those that are the most behind on executive function training tend to see the best results. So that tends to be people who are from lower socioeconomic backgrounds, for example, tend to have the worst executive functions when they start, but they seem to have the biggest benefit of executive function training. And this isn't just reversion to the mean, and so this could help just narrow down some social disparities. Principle number 6 is that duration is important. It's better to keep it up over an extended period of time than try and do a month of intense executive function training and then never touch it again. Sorry, it is something that you have to do consistently. But remember, consistency for ADHD doesn't mean do it every day. It just means keep it going at a semi-regular pace. Principle number 7 was that the dose mattered. So 30 to 40 minutes was pretty optimal. Anything below 30 minutes and it wasn't really beneficial, with the exception of something called quadrato motor training, which I'll talk about a bit later, but that could be done in 7-minute chunks. Anything over an hour, you weren't really seeing any extra benefits from it. Principle number 8 was that spaced practice improved long-term outcomes rather than trying to jam everything into one gap. It's like what I know from playing piano myself. If you practice a little bit every day, then you're going to get much more benefit than if you try and do 5 hours straight of piano practice over the weekend. And finally, for principle number 9, they found that executive function benefits were most clearly seen on things that pushed us to the limits of our executive function, which makes sense. We see the much more benefit from doing the harder stuff than we do from doing the easier stuff over and over again. So with that in mind, there are a number of different approaches to executive function training that were evaluated. Some of them didn't really have much research on them, and so it's hard to draw a conclusion, but a number of them were actually really well studied. We're going to look at the top and the bottom of the list. So we're going to look at the 4 most least useful executive function trainings and the 4 best executive function training methods. Here we go. Starting with the least useful. Coming in last is one that actually disappoints me a little bit because I've been doing it for the past 8 years, but that is actually resistance training. There's no real evidence to show that it's useful for executive function. The evidence that there was not that great. It's only a slight bit of evidence, and it just seems to not affect things either way. It's not bad for your executive function, so if you enjoy doing it, keep on doing it. I still do it. But you're not really getting an executive function benefit out of resistance training. Second to last is what they call plain aerobic exercise. So that's something like walking or running, and it's almost like cardio for cardio's sake. You're not doing any fine motor movements or anything like that that maybe engages your brain a little bit longer. You're just doing exercise. Again, there was just no real evidence to say it benefited it, but there is some nuance here, so I'm going to come back to that a little bit later on. Third is another one I do, unfortunately, and that's yoga. And it's a little bit surprising that yoga is so far down, given what ultimately comes up on top, but I'm going to talk about that a little bit later. And fourth is what they call enhanced aerobic exercise. So that's exercise that involves the fine motor skills a little bit, which includes most sports. You'll notice that this entire list of the 4 worst things evaluated were exercise based. And that's a bit strange because there's ample stuff out there saying that exercise is good for ADHD. In fact, it's even been found that people who are fitter tend to have better executive function as well. So what's going on here? One argument is that people need to do aerobic exercise over years to see a benefit, and so a study is probably a too short time frame for this. They also pointed out that people who do aerobic exercise probably enjoy it, and enjoyment and cognitive benefit are actually correlated. In addition, people who engage in physical activity probably also have a social aspect to it, or a sense of pride and achievement, and so these social benefits likely feed into it as well. Taken together, these points could explain why people who are fitter tend to have better executive function. Now, of course, the other way around could be true. It could be that people who have better executive function are more likely to be able to maintain an exercise routine. That paper doesn't try and disprove that. And this kind of explains why yoga in particular is so far down the list, but that's actually not the whole picture. And it turns out that actually depends on how yoga is implemented. The results are really mixed for different kinds of implementation of yoga. But in order to get a little bit more into that, we actually need to talk about what's at the top of the list. However, when it comes to looking into the best executive function practices, we're actually going to take a pause and come back to that next week, because my executive function prefers 2 shorter videos to 1 super long video. So that's where we'll leave it for today. Having laid out the fundamental principles of executive function improvement and looked at the surprising things that come out at the bottom of the list. Do you have any ideas of what might come out top of the list? Leave a comment below if you think you might know. Hit like and subscribe, and if you haven't seen it already, you might be interested in going back and watching my video about what are your superpowers to find out your personal unique strengths. Thank you for your attention today, and I will see you in the next one.